Yeah, hello. I'm an architect, and a few years ago we started to design buildings like Lego out of reusable components. And today I want to tell you a little bit about the journey and how we got there, and why it is so important to think in this way. 4 years ago, I was standing in front of a demolition site, and I still remember all this unpleasant smell of dust, plaster, or old insulation. And there were all these containers full of material, wood, steel, glass, materials that were still intact, but on their way to the landfill. And I thought, why do our buildings die when they are still full of life? Back then, we were renovating an old house at the Baltic Sea, and we changed the floor plans, we kept the structural frame, and we rebuilt everything. And still, in the end, there were those containers, full of materials which couldn't separate it, which couldn't used in a new life cycle. And that's when it clicked for me. Why do we build with materials that only can be thrown away instead of those who become part of something new? And I'm asking you, do you know this feeling when you maybe have something old, like old furniture, and you throw it away and it felt unpleasant? Do you know this? Any one of you? Yeah, that's exactly the feeling I also experienced. And of course, this isn't just a personal problem. What we are facing at the moment is that more than 50% of global waste is caused by the construction industry. Less than 1% of materials get reused at the moment. And at the same time, we are facing exploding material costs, and we are heading straight towards a massive shortage of raw materials. We live in a linear construction economy: build, use, demolish, waste. And whenever something changes, or we need a flexible demand, the only solution we have is demolition or build with containers. Why is this? I think because we don't put any values to material. When we stand in front of a building after 20 years, on paper, it's worthless. Instead of continuing to use the raw materials and the craftsmanship that went into the materials, we just think, after 20 years, it's worthless. And now I want to ask you, what does actually building cheaply means? Does it mean that we build out of cheap materials? Or does it mean that we build out of materials which can last for a really, really, really long time? Maybe some facts. Why do I am telling you this today? In 15 years, most of the materials we are using today will be no longer available or affordable. So we have to start rethinking now the way we build our future in architecture and buildings for tomorrow. Let's look to an extreme example: schools. Only in Germany, we have a renovation backlog of over 45 billion euros. Around 3,500 schools have to get renovated. So it means we need temporary schools next to it, we take the pupils out for the renovation time, and this means, when we sum it up, approximately 5 million of square meters space of provisional space. And what's our answer? Containers. Containers everywhere. And I don't know if you ever worked or studied in a container. I mean, I did for nearly a year, and I can tell you it was neither beautiful or inspiring or healthy or anything, and no one wants them. So what if we could change this whole system? What if we could think in architecture for changing demands? So let's look at the, let's say, wooden beam. A wooden beam consists out of 50% material, 40% manufacturing costs, and 10% planning. That beam, at the same time, can last more than 100 years. Like even in our house, where we had our renovation, we let the old beams from 1910 in the house and rebuild around it. So why do we write them off to zero in accounting after just 20 years? What would happen if we would treat them as assets, including their reusability in our calculation? And another example, and maybe to make another example, if we design buildings so that 80 or 90% of the buildings can be reused, and we also think that these elements can last 60, 80, or 100 years, we could cut our rents by half. And this is not just helping the environment, this saves money from all of us. So if we already know this, why do we still plan as everything were endlessly available? That's exactly what we are working on in our company, that we design architectures out of reusable components. Buildings as modular systems, dismantleable, reversible, and transparent. So we have beams, knot, columns. We stick it together to a rigid frame, and we can hang facades, walls, ceiling into it. We can, over time, extend the building in all directions. We can put stories on top of it, or we can relieve stories later on. Or we take all of these components and can reconfigure them in a new building. And every component becomes a digital identity. So we connect it to a digital twin and a database. So we know exactly of each element how much material is in it, where it is installed, and when it can be reused and come in the next life cycle. And this way, a component doesn't lose its value anymore. It simply waits for its next reuse. And especially at this time, it becomes a tradable asset. And with this strategy, buildings become whole material banks. It's not landfills anymore after their lifespan. It's not things that lose value over time, but it's a store of value for the future. So technically, it's possible. What is missing? What is missing at the moment is the right mindset, that we truly believe in this asset, in an element. Once a component properly can be measured, tracked, and even insured, reuse won't be an option anymore. It will become the new standard. We already accept that in mobility, things can be shared. Why don't we share also capital in buildings? Not car sharing, but build sharing. Building elements that move where they are needed and structures that don't disappear, but evolve. And perhaps the most exciting part is these building components can also be financed. Imagine this. You don't invest in an entire building anymore. You only invest in each single element, like our beam. It's a component which is healthy, it's reusable, and it has material that lives on, and it continually moves and becomes part of a new space. So you're not financing anymore the end of a building or an area, you're actually financing in its future. Imagine you could start tomorrow, buy shares in such components. So you would not put money into speculations, but in true assets. You can track, you can measure, yeah, you can even see. And so you put your money in spaces of the future, in schools, in neighborhoods, in places of learning and community. So I'm asking you here, would you be ready, maybe raise your hand, would you be ready to invest your money in components? Good, yeah? Oh, good. So if we start seeing materials not as waste, but as assets, everything changes. So we no longer build things that lose value. We build things that can create value over time. Sustainability is then not about limitation, it's about creativity and possibility. So when you go home today, look around you, look at the walls, the ceilings, maybe a wooden beam which you can touch, and think about it or imagine that each of these things could hold value even beyond your use, how this would feel. Because with every decision you make, you have to ask yourself, can what I invest in keeps its value and generate new value over time? Because this is where real change begins, not in 15 years, but today. And we don't just build houses, we build future again and again. Thank you.